Now, the next verse, the lesson doesn't say a lot about this, but I took some time because in evangelism, I get more questions on this verse than anything else in the study today. And that is 1 Peter 3, verse 18 through 20. Now, I'm going to read this to you. For Christ also suffered once for sin, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh and made alive in the Spirit, by whom he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. Now, how many of you have heard questions about this verse before? Peter says here that by which Spirit he went and preached to those spirits in prison in the days of Noah. And the way that a lot of evangelicals view this verse, some of you know the Apostles' Creed, which is recited by Catholics, and there's a Protestant version of the Apostles' Creed. And it says that Jesus died, he went into the hell, and they think he went down into hell and he preached to lost souls to sort of give them a second chance. I just thought, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong. I looked up at a very popular evangelical website called Got Questions, where people ask Bible questions, and it says, the spirits in prison mentioned in the context of what Jesus did in the time between his death and resurrection. Note, Jesus' body was dead and awaiting resurrection, but he was spiritually alive during that time. He visited the spirits in prison, and they say that this was one of two things, that he either went to people who during the time of Noah did not understand the gospel, so he could preach to them, give them another chance, which means Jesus wasn't really dead, that he kind of just transmigrated when he died on the cross. Or they say that he went to preach to fallen angels that were imprisoned, because it talks about angels in chains of darkness, that some of those who followed Lucifer needed a second chance. There's all kinds of weird things that are taught about this. What does this verse mean, and what does it not mean? Well, first of all, what it doesn't mean, Jesus on the cross was dead. The penalty for sin is death. The penalty for sin is not to transmigrate into another phase. Jesus died. It's really clear. It says he died for our sins. And then it says he rose, which means before he rose, he was dead. But I can understand people have a struggle. How can the Son of God die? God ceasing to be conscious. Well, how could he be a baby? I mean, you have the same problem there too. It is a mystery. It's called the mystery of godliness there. But what does the verse mean? If you look, it says, by whom he went and preached to the spirits in prison who were disobedient in the days of Noah. Go to the book of Genesis, and if you turn to Genesis chapter 6, this is a verse that is often misunderstood. Peter's referring back to this verse, I believe. And the Lord said, my spirit, Genesis 6:3, my spirit will not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days will be 120 years. It's talking 120 years. How long did Noah preach while he built the ark? You'll notice in the next verses, Noah's called. And he preaches from the time he's called, with his hammer, with his voice, to those who were imprisoned by the devil in sin. The Bible is very clear that those who do not have Christ are imprisoned by sin. And he preached to those. God is saying the same Spirit that rose Jesus from the dead is the same Spirit that God used to preach to the people who were disobedient in the days of Noah. It's the Spirit of Christ that was preaching through Noah, that same Spirit that rose Jesus. That's all that Peter was saying. He's not saying that Jesus didn't really die on the cross, but he went to preach to people that were in a cavern somewhere in prison, and he gave them a second chance. Do we get a second chance? Does the Bible teach that once you die, you can hear the gospel one more time? Hebrews 9:27, it is appointed for men to die once, but after this, the judgment. Not die, hear the gospel one more time. That's right. It's very important for people to understand that. So that doctrine that Jesus wasn't really dead on the cross sort of leads to all kinds of strange heresies. Another simple rule is don't build theology on one verse. If you take one verse that seems obscure, don't say, I'm going to build this whole doctrine about that. It's like you got that one reference to Abraham's bosom in Luke 16, and I've run into people that have built a whole Protestant version of limbo or purgatory out of that one verse. It's not safe to do. You want to have 2 or 3 witnesses if you're going to start developing a doctrine. Anyway, does that make sense then? Peter's talking about Genesis 6:3. Let me read it to you one more time. For Christ suffered once for sin, the just for the unjust. That's really clear. That he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive, resurrected by the Spirit. By whom? By what? By the same Spirit, he, Jesus, went and he preached to the spirits, people in prison back in the days of Noah, who were disobedient when the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. My Spirit will not strive forever, but for 120 years, in which a few, 8 souls were saved. So through the preaching of Jesus, through Noah, how many were saved? Any dead spirits? No. 8 were saved. That's Noah. It's not talking about others. Not talking about fallen angels. I just want to make that clear. Now, I'm not just doing this for you because I think you understand, but a lot of people watch this Sabbath school that are not members of our church that struggle with these things. We get this question all the time on Bible Answers Live. All right, and then we go to the next section.